All right, everyone. So I've got a couple requests for going over homework number 3, question 19, that's looking at where the economy is operating when there's a specific change in inventory that's not equal to 0. I think probably the best way to tackle this is to go through both questions 18 and 19, because question 18 says you've got this table here where we have GDP going from 1,000 to 1,400. We've got the levels of consumption, planned investment spending, G and NX. And in question 18, you're supposed to find the equilibrium. Find the equilibrium level of output, level of Y. Okay, so that's the goal overall. So let's figure out how we want to tackle this. So the first thing we want to do is recognize that equilibrium is going to occur when Y is equal to aggregate expenditures. We know that aggregate expenditures is equal to consumption plus planned investment spending plus G plus NX. Now, this table here gives us all the information we need to answer this, so we can go ahead and add a new column, aggregate expenditures, here at the end. The other thing to note, as we've talked about many times before, and it's throughout the book, planned investment spending, government expenditures, and net exports, these are all fixed. These aren't changing when Y changes. So we've got a 50 unit planned investment spending, government expenditures are 210, and net exports, those can be negative. They're negative 60. We add 50 to 10 and then subtract 60, and we get 200. So our aggregate expenditures, it's going to be consumption plus 200. So we can go ahead and put that in this final column here. We've got 850. We're going to add these $200 in fixed cost, or fixed spending rather, and we're going to end up with 1050. So there's 1050 because that's consumption plus 200. This is going to go up to 925 plus 200, or 1125. When we get to $1,000 in consumption, we're going to add 200 to that. We're going to get 1200. All right. Then this, at 1,300, this will go to 1,275, and then we'll go to 1,350 for our final row here. Okay, so we've got our aggregate expenditures now. We've just got to quickly find equilibrium. Where do we find equilibrium? We find where Y is equal to AE. We can just go look at this column of real GDP and find out when it equals aggregate expenditures. That happens to be at 1,200 and 1,200. Okay, so that's going to be our equilibrium level of output. Now, if we want to be complete about this economy, the other thing we'd like to find is we want to find what the change in inventory is for each level of output. Okay, the change in inventory, because this is really holding our entire equilibrium together, right? The concept of equilibrium comes from this. So our change in inventory at Y equals AE, we know is going to be equal to 0. Why is this the case? Well, there's a couple of reasons, but I think intuitively you can think about it as saying when we're in equilibrium, firms are producing the same exact amount that they're selling. The amount they're producing is 1,200. That's under the real GDP column. The amount that's being bought, the amount that's spent in the economy, that's also equal to 1,200. So we've got our change in inventory equal to 0 at that point. All right, so that can center us, and go ahead and put 0 right there. Now, if we think about what the change in inventory is, we would say if it's the amount that firms need to either compensate or produce too much of when they're not in equilibrium. So our change in inventory, we can define this more directly as Y minus aggregate expenditures. So this would be telling us that we have a certain amount of production. If that production is more than the amount of spending that occurs in the economy, then we're going to actually add to our inventory, right? So if you can intuitively think about that, we're producing too much when we have this inventory going up. If inventory is going down, we're not producing enough, so in that case, our spending would be more than production. So we can literally define this change in inventory as Y minus AE, right? Take that difference there. So in this first row here, we've got 1,000 units of real GDP. We've got an aggregate expenditures of 1050. That means we've got $50 in extra spending that hasn't been produced. So it's coming from previous inventory. It's coming from that stock room, right? And how much is being pulled out of that stock room? $50. Okay, so then when we go to 1100, we've got 1100 units being produced, but we've got 1125 units being bought, right? So that means that 25 units are going to have to come out of the back room, right? So there's going to be 1125 units spent. That's 25 units more than was produced. At equilibrium, again, by definition, firms are producing the exact same amount that they're spending, or that's being bought rather. So spending is exactly equal to production. So in that case, there's going to be no change in inventory. So that's always going to be the case with equilibrium. Go a little bit further, produce too much. Now firms are producing 1,300 units. They're only selling 1,275. What's going to happen to inventory? It's going to go up by 25 units. Right. Go to the last point, 1,400 in production. We've got 1,350 being bought. That means we're going to add 50 to inventory. So our inventory is going to be positive. If we look at question 19 just says, at what level of Y is inventory changing by negative 25? So where is it going down by 25 units? All we've got to do is look at this column and say, right here at negative 25, our Y is equal to 1100. So that's going to be our answer. So when firms produce 1100, all right, they're gonna take away 25 units from inventory because they're not producing enough. Ultimately, that means the next period they're going to increase their output. That's going to increase spending, and they're going to move towards that equilibrium of 1200. Okay, hopefully that clears up those two questions. We'll see you guys in the next question.